Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's the off season, and that means only one thing: 2025 predictions. And today we're going to go over my ATP top 10 players for 2025. So that means I'm going to be predicting the top 10 rankings as of the end of the year for the 2025 season. Before we do get into it, though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Also, thank you to our members. We appreciate each and every one of you. You guys are legends for supporting the channel, and we appreciate every single one of you that engages with us, that comments, and that gets involved in some capacity with this platform. We're growing, and we appreciate everyone's support. Okay, let's get into it then. So first of all, what I'm going to do is just briefly go over the actual top 10 for the end of the year for 2024. And we've got that there on screen. If you're listening, don't worry, I'll go through it. Then, of course, we're going to break down my top 10 for 2025. And look, there's going to be some people going ballistic in the comment section, and I always love that. So please do leave your predicted top 10 for 2025 in the comment section below. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what you guys put, and also look forward to debating with you guys in the chat as well. This is a hard prediction to do. I have to be honest, because look, I mean, the top 4, 5 weren't too hard, but I would say, especially from 7 to 10, for me, it was very difficult. Very, very difficult. There's a lot of players that I've noted as just outside. So we're going to also note some players, some honorable mentions, some players who I think could have snuck into my top 10, but I think they might just be floating around the top 15 mark, maybe top 20 mark, so just outside of the top 10. But they could easily make their way into the top 10. And I've got quite a few players that I've noted, probably more than I've ever noted when I've done these predicted top 10 videos. So it says a lot about, I think, the strength and depth of the ATP Tour right now. It's very competitive. I think the only thing I'd say is that outside of Sinner, Alcaraz, and Djokovic, if he's fit, the rest of the players, it's almost open season. Anyone can beat anyone, it seems, seemingly anyway. There's a lot of surprises that happened this year as well. And, you know, I'm very much looking forward to seeing how the season pans out, because there's been some interesting developments, of course, in 2024. So let's get into the actual top 10 for 2024 as of the end of the year. So number 1, of course, we had Yannick Sinner, won 2 slams, won the Davis Cup, ATP finals, had a phenomenal year. We'll go into it in more detail when we do the predictions for 2025, but really good year for him. And number 2, Alexander Zverev, final of Roland Garros, played a lot of tournaments this year, won the Paris Masters as well. He's had a pretty solid season, took over from Alcaraz. You know, a lot of people were very much not questioning, but I think there were some raised eyebrows when he did overtake Alcaraz in the number 2 spot, because he hasn't won a slam. Alcaraz has won 2, but that's just the way the ranking system works. If you play a lot of tournaments and you progress well in, you know, Masters 1000 tournament or 500 or 250s, and you're playing consistently well throughout, and you haven't won a slam or 2 in the case of Alcaraz, then mathematically you can overtake him, and that's exactly what's happened in this case. And number 3, we have Alcaraz, and number 4, Taylor Fritz, who had a phenomenal season as well, made the US Open final, made the ATP Finals final. It was a season or career, career season best for Taylor Fritz. You know, very impressive season, a breakthrough year for him, and you know, didn't manage to win a slam, but you know what? He's trending in the right direction. For number 5, we had Daniel Medvedev, and final of the Australian Open, of course, a heartbreaking loss there to Yannick Sinner after being 2 sets to love up. Also in the semi-finals of Wimbledon, but then had a pretty big dip, I would say, towards the second half of the season, especially as it culminated in the ATP finals, where he didn't make it out of the group. Definitely mentally, physically, just looked drained. There's a lot of question marks, I think, around him going into 2025 after some comments he made. He was my favorite player to interview this year at Wimbledon, and I really like him as a player. But, I just think there's a lot of factors going against him. It's not just due to the conditions and balls, but also just the styles of players and other things that are coming and cropping up. And it's getting to a point where it could potentially get harder and harder for him as time goes on. At number 6, we had Casper Ruud, and this was an interesting one because I, didn't really see him making this late surge, and he did, and I was impressed. He was outside the top 10 at one point during the year, but he had a really good, strong end to the season and managed to creep in at number 6. At number 7, Novak Djokovic, of course, won the Olympic gold. That was his main goal of 2024. He said it before the season even started. Also made the final of Wimbledon, of course, semi-finals of the Australian Open. Not too much to really talk about apart from that. But as I said, it was really job done for him after he won the Olympics. At number 8, we had Andrei Rublev, a very consistent season for him. And, he wins a lot of matches. He plays a lot of tournaments. He must be in the top 5 for most tournaments played on tour, in the top 100 players at least anyway, because he's just constantly playing. He's playing Hong Kong as well in a couple of weeks' time, and he's just continually playing. And you know what? I have to say that is a testament to him and his conditioning and his physical recovery, because he is clearly able to get through a lot without his body breaking down, and that's an impressive feat in itself. And number 9, Alex de Minaur. Now, he had a good season. Some breakthrough runs at slams, including, of course, Wimbledon quarter final, where he got injured, wasn't able to play Novak Djokovic in that quarter final. So that was, a massive shame for him. And I talked to him in the press conference, and you could just tell he was heartbroken. He was almost in tears in a really, really tough moment, not just for his season, but for his career as well. He was playing the best tennis he'd ever played in his career, as he said in that press conference, and to then have it, you know, be taken away from him, that opportunity because of an injury right at the end as well of that previous match, was understandably heartbreaking for him. But what he did really well for me, after recovering from the injury and despite having a disappointing US Open, he had a really strong end to the season, and really strong for the fact that he just wasn't able, of course, to move maybe quite as well as he did at the start of the year. I don't think he was 100% still for the rest of the season, but he still managed to pull off some impressive wins and also runs. And look, movement is the foundation and the epitome really of his game. He's the quickest player on tour when he's fit, and the majority of his game is built upon that. It's almost about beating his opponent with movement. And yeah, he's a really interesting player who seems to be getting the most out of his game right now, in all honesty. He doesn't have big weapons, but definitely an exciting player to watch, works hard, and he's had some very consistent results. And number 10, Grigor Dimitrov. And look, he is a fantastic player, isn't he? I mean, let's be honest, he's a fantastic player, really exciting to watch. And I'm hoping that he will again be able to replicate some of those impressive wins he's had, including, of course, like wins over players like Alcaraz. We'll see how he goes. But look, I've been very much impressed with his Indian summer, let's say, to his career. It's been refreshing to watch, and I have a feeling that we could see some big runs from him, and I'm hoping we do, because he's just such a fantastic player to watch, and he seems like such a gracious player as well. He clearly wants to work hard. He knows that he's not of the ilk of, say, the big four, and he's played with those players, and he knows what kind of level he's at. But what's great to see is that he knows maybe this is my time. Maybe I'm able to do something at the end here, and hopefully he can. Hopefully he can do something. We'll see, right? We'll see. But still got he's still got some chances. Maybe not potentially to win a slam, but Masters 1000 tournaments, etc. We'll see how he goes. But I'm very much intrigued to see how he ends his season. Right, okay. So predicted top 10 for 2025 then. Look, guys, I'm going to be honest. This is going to be interesting because there are a lot of players that could have crept into this top 10. I'm going to be honest. Now, this player, you guys are probably going to just look at me or think in your head and say, Fazan, there's some bias here because this guy's British and clearly you like British players. Of course you would. And that's the reason why you picked him in your top 10. But no, that's not why. I promise. I promise it's not the reason. It's Jack Draper. There's a few reasons for it. Now, before we get into maybe my thoughts and feelings on how he's been playing, let's look at some of the stats. So, what's been most impressive, I think, this year in comparison to previous years, there's two things. And we can go into his level, which I think is a separate topic, but he has played almost double the amount of matches this year as he did last year in 2023. So in 2023, he played 31 matches. This year, he played 59. On top of that, his win percentage has gone from 61% to 64%. So it's not a huge jump, but it's a measurable jump. It's an incremental jump, and that's been impressive. And it's been trending because at 2022 was at 58%, to then 61, to then 64. So it's gradually trending in the right direction. In terms of titles, well, he won 2 this year. In Vienna, he won, beating Karen Khachanov 6-4, 7-5. And then in Stuttgart, he beat Berrettini. And that was, and again, a very impressive victory on the grass. In Adelaide, he lost to Yuri Lehechka in the final. And that was, of course, right at the start of the year. Look, he's been playing some very, very good tennis. I mean, the semi-finals of the US Open, lost to Yannick Sinner, and there's definitely going to be some question marks around still his physical conditioning, and also not just his physical conditioning in terms of making sure that he stays injury-free, because that's been, of course, a big problem in prior seasons, but also his conditioning during matches, during 5-setters, when it's really hot and humid, and it becomes really taxing on the body. We saw against Sinner, and it wasn't as bad as it has been in the past. We haven't seen severe cramping, etc. That's been good to see that hasn't been a real regular occurrence this year. But we still saw some of the vomiting, some of the real, deep breaths, the heave, the hands on the knees, the gasp for breath almost at times from him. And look, the conditions are really hard, right, for mere mortals like you and me. But if you watched Yannick Sinner in comparison to Draper, there was a difference. And Sinner was struggling at times, you could tell, but there was a big difference in how much they were struggling during that match. And, Draper was having to work really hard, of course, right? Because Sinner ended up winning that match, winning that tournament. He's the best player in the world. But the level I think that Draper showed in that match, I think, was the biggest positive to take from that experience. One, he was pretty close to Sinner in the sets. And two, the level that he brought, I thought was really, really good. And if he can play that type of level throughout the majority of 2025 and also improve, even incrementally, he's going to be in the top 10 for me. And that's my thoughts on that. So a lot of it's going to hinge on his body, if I'm being honest. But my hopes are that he will be able to hold up. At number 9, we've got Andrei Rublev. Now, this is an interesting one, right? Because for Andre, he's had an interesting season. It hasn't been phenomenal. Definitely hasn't been as good as his previous years, I think is probably fair to say. And I'll explain to you why. So, before we get into the win percentage, let's look at his tournament. So, look, a Masters 1000 tournament won this year. Really impressive, right? He won a lot of tournaments last year, by the way. It has to be said. At least made a lot of finals anyway. 1-2 last year and 1-2 this year, but made more finals last year. So won Madrid, beating Felix Auger-Aliassime. That was a good win, of course. Masters 1000 title, impressive. Hong Kong, he won as well. Right at the start of the year, 1st of Jan, beating Emil Rusevori. He's playing that again this year, or in 2025. It's a 250. And then, of course, made the final of the Canadian Masters. Didn't manage to win his second Masters title in a year. Alexei Popyrin played some inspired tennis, I think it's fair to say, to end up beating Andre in that match. So, now let's get into... oh, this is going to be interesting. Now let's get into his win percentage. This has been... It's not looked great for Andre, if I'm being honest. His win percentage has continually dropped since 2020. So in 2020, he almost peaked, I think it's fair to say. 80% was his win percentage, which is damn good. Damn good. And if we're talking about ELO or ELO ratings, I mean, his ELO rating for 2020 was looking pretty good. I mean, it was at 2058, which is anything over 2000. I'm thinking, yeah, that's good. That's good. So yeah, 80% for 2020 was win percentage or match win percentage. 2021, it was at 71%. Then, to be fair, I mean, it stayed relatively consistent. 2022 was at 72%. But then the dips happened. Now, 2023 was at 69%. So it's a pretty small dip from 71 to 69. Okay, fine, only 2%. But then it's dipped now to 61%. That's a pretty substantial dip. Look, I'm going to be honest. He doesn't seem to be trending in the right direction. He clearly has had some mental blocks at slams, and he hasn't made those big leaps and bounds he would have hoped for at slams. Let's be real. He hasn't. It's only getting harder as well now, because before he had, Roger and Rafa and Novak to contend with, but now he's going to have to deal with Sinner and Alcaraz and Zverev, and even Fritz has come through, Medvedev. You look at Rublev versus the top 7 of 2024, and he probably loses to all of them consistently. And in fact, sorry, not probably, he does lose to all of them consistently. The only player you can maybe say, maybe has a chance against potentially a beating, and it could be close, is Casper Ruud. Sinner, Zverev, Alcaraz, Fritz, Medvedev, Djokovic, all of them. I don't even need to look in detail at the head-to-head, because I can tell you now, the head-to-head from knowledge is in favor of the opponent. Some of them are very lopsided as well. Medvedev, for example, Djokovic, for example, really lopsided head-to-heads against Andrei Rublev. So that's not a great sign. Then we had to then talk about the on-court issues. Hitting himself with his racket, hitting himself with his hand, the cuts on his hands, on his legs, the screaming, the shouting, and a lot of players wear their heart on their sleeve, and that's all good. That's fine. That can happen. When you watch a player who's fiery, who has that raw emotion, you expect there to be some outbursts, and that's fine. There's players like that. There's no issue with it. However, there are some players when you end up watching them and they go beyond the line of what is seen as being acceptable, let's say. And I think Andre's gone beyond that a few times. And it's a shame because he is a fantastic player to watch. And off court, he is one of the nicest guys, from what I've been told, off court as well, if not the nicest. Very bubbly personality, infectious, smart, really funny. I didn't have the pleasure of speaking to him at Wimbledon, but that's from what I hear. And, I think he needs to be not careful, but he needs to just sort this out in some shape or form. And clearly it's a work in progress. He's talked about it in depth and he gets asked about it a lot. And, I think sometimes it's too much. I think he doesn't need to constantly be asked about it. Of course, it's a very easy piece to be written by journalists just to ask him, like, is that the reason why you lost today, etc., etc. But I think for me, if he's able to at least just channel that or control it in a better way, then it won't affect his tennis as much. I think it is affecting his tennis, at least to some degree, anyway. So what I would say is that actually for Andre, it's going to be a question of how does he look form wise and level wise going into 2025 or at the start of the season, and also is he able to just organize his emotions in a better way, I think is the best way of putting it. And we'll see. We'll see, right? I don't know what he's going to do in the off season, but that would be my thing because we know he's got a phenomenal forehand. We know that he is able to produce some magical things. His first serve is can be really potent at times, and second serve maybe needs some work. The backhand has become a lot more consistent over the years as well. He's added some things to his game. The drop shot, it's not, a top 5, top 10 drop shot, but he's added something there. He does try to come forward more, I've seen as well. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think for me, first and foremost, and he's talked about not loving playing tennis at times, and I think that's really where the work needs to be done, in my opinion. And hopefully he does do that because we want to see the best players at their best. And he's one of those players that's always there around the 6 to 10 mark. And his 2025 season can go one of three ways. Number one, he could break into the top 5 by winning a slam, for example, or which I think I would be surprised by, but it can happen. Sinner and Alcaraz go out early, for example. He makes a deep run, has a breakthrough against one of those players. And for example, Medvedev, the confidence he takes from that is huge. Goes on to win a title. It could happen, a slam, or he wins multiple Masters 1000 tournaments. He plays a consistent season of winning titles throughout the whole year. It could happen, him breaking through. Zverev didn't win a slam title, still managed to finish at number 2. So it's doable. And Rublev plays a lot of tournaments as well. So it's possible, probable that it could happen if he is consistent and plays a really good level throughout the year. Or he could stay as he is now, have a few patches where he plays really, really well and then, plays relatively well throughout the rest of the year, stays around that 6 to 10 mark. Or he could have another dip in match win percentage, in level, in confidence, in maybe mentality, and drop outside the top 10. Let's see what happens. I've gone with the second option. The safe option, I guess you'd say. It stays almost the same. It just drops one spot. Then I've gone for someone who hasn't had a very good season in Stefanos Tsitsipas. And my pick is really based off a couple of things. Steph was at number 11, so he wasn't too far off the top 10 anyway, despite having a pretty poor season, I think it's fair to say. Look, I mean, it was an interesting season, to say the least. Won one title this year, Monte Carlo, which I almost want to say doesn't count. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but he's won it now quite, I don't know, a few times, and you almost just think like he goes into that tournament and just plays like prime Roger Federer. That's maybe an exaggeration, but I mean he just plays so well. I mean he dispatched Kasparov 6-1, 6-4 in that final, and look, I mean, apart from that, it's been slim pickings. Made the final of Barcelona, lost to Kasparov, Ruud got revenge. And if we look at his win percentage year on year, it makes interesting reading. There is a general trend of it dipping. 75% in 2021. That was his highest or his best season for match win percentage. Then dipped to 72% in 2022. Then dipped again to 68% in 2023. Then dipped, but only by 1% to 67% in 2024. So 2023, 2024, and I think everyone said that 2023 and 2024 weren't good seasons for him. The only good thing coming from the 2023 season was when he made the final, of course, of Australia, of the Australian Open. But apart from that, it was a pretty, again, it was a season of slim pickings. I think it's fair to say. Only one lost Carbos last year. Nothing really to write home about otherwise for 2023. However, this season it was interesting because it was the first season for I think in the last 4 seasons that he hasn't made the ATP finals. So that was something that I think was definitely playing on his mind, and he put it in one of his Instagram posts as well when he was talking about findings or learnings from the season. So definitely something that he will be thinking about, I think, going into the season, into the 2025 season. And I'm intrigued to see how he handles now this off season, and also the mentality that he has even going into the season. My hope is that he's going to rediscover some of that form that we saw in 2022, 2021. He needs to be brave in his play. He also needs to have a stable coach. I know he's working with the Davis Cup coach at the moment. Whoever it's going to be, I don't think. Look, I don't know who the perfect coach is for Steph, right? I'm going to be honest. All I know is that he needs some stability, and it will really help, in my opinion, with his season. His dad isn't there. It clearly didn't work out with his dad. I just think it was it was a volatile relationship in the fact, in a volatile coaching relationship, and it obviously had its perks, but it also had its downfalls or its pitfalls. And he needs a coach that's going to get the most out of him, that he respects, that he's going to listen to, and they've got a really good working relationship that isn't going to be volatile like that. Because I think Steph will play better with a more calm and solid foundation in his team. So he needs that, if I'm being honest. There are still some holes, of course, with his backhand. We know that. But, when he's confident, it does make a big difference on the backhand side. We know that he should be playing his best tennis on clay and didn't really play well enough, I think, on clay apart from Monte Carlo this year. But he also needs to be able to play better on other surfaces, right? Made the final of the Australian Open last year. He made multiple semi-finals there. I think Australia is going to be an important tournament, the Australian Open. I think the first 2-3 months are going to be crucial for him. He really needs to be able to get over the hurdle of also some of the players that he's been coming up against. He's been losing quite routinely to players like Medvedev recently. That hasn't really become much of a rivalry like it was in the past. So those are the types of matches he's going to have to re-step up. Look, he's got one of the best forehands on tour. He's up there in terms of serve quality as well. He's one of the best hands on tour. There is no reason why he should not be in the top 10 of the ATP rankings. The only thing that he tends to trip up on is the mentality, definitely. And also, I think he can just play a bit safe at times, and his game is built upon being offensive. So he needs to really just tap into that. And that doesn't mean being reckless, but it does mean when he gets a short ball to not go half-heartedly at the approach shot and then get picked off in the net because you've hit or you've dropped a forehand kind of half court, vaguely into someone's backhand. He needs to be a bit braver on those in those moments to give himself the best possible chance. And I see him having. I'm hoping that this season has been a wake up call, and I'm hoping that it means that it'll give him a real kick up the behind or backside, really, to fire him up for this season and to pick up his level again. So let's see. Let's see. I'm hoping that's the case. At number 7, I've gone for someone who also needs to have coaching stability because it's been a coaching merry-go-round, of course, for him. Holger Rune, you know, he's with Patrick Mouratoglou, then he's not, then he is, then he's not. Look, I mean, we could talk about Holger for a while. I think there's a few things for him. He's clearly caught between styles. I don't think he knows exactly which way he should be playing. I've said this for a while. I've said this actually for at least a year, if not a year and a half. I just don't know what type of player he is. Is he a player that's going to come forward a lot and he's going to volley a lot and be aggressive and finish points in the net? Is he going to be a player that is a power baseliner? Is he going like a Fritz? Is he going to be a counter puncher? Like a Medvedev? Is he going to be, a player who's a lot of variety, like an Alcaraz? I have no idea because I just don't think he has an identity. His style of play, his game does not have a clear cut identity right now, and he plays in lots of different ways even throughout um, his matches. And I think it was Jim Curry. I think really said something quite harsh. You could argue about Rune and just said like there's loads of bits that he's playing as if he's a bitty player. There's no real cohesive structure to the way that he plays. And I think he was alluding to the same point that I'm making, that it's tough sometimes to watch him play because you just don't. I feel like sometimes he doesn't even know what he should be doing. And he's such a talented player. So maybe he just thinks that I'm playing with variety, but it more comes across as he's continually changing tactically and style wise how he's playing throughout a match, which can be confusing for yourself. And it can be very hard to stick to, of course, right? If you're constantly having to change the way you play throughout matches. So let's see how he gets on. My hope is that he has stability with his coach. His mentality is great. I talked to him at Wimbledon and I was impressed with the way that he speaks. I think he's really, really good. He's very mature in the way that he speaks, which is funny because not a lot of people obviously think that, especially on court. But he does seem very mature when you speak to him in press conferences. I was actually quite impressed with him and the way that he carries himself. He's obviously relatively confident as well, but I think he's almost realistic with himself. He knows that he's not at that level of Sinner and Alcaraz, like how people were talking about him being in the past. So I think he knows he has a lot of work to do in the off season. I think the off season for him is he needs to find a clear way of this is how I want to play. Yes, I can have variety in my game, but this is the way that I'm going to play. This is my identity. This is my go-to. And yes, I can throw in some things like, I could still be a counter puncher, but occasionally throw in a serve volley. But I'm not going to play 5 different ways, you know, in a match because I just can't play that way. So let's see how he gets on. He's got phenomenal movement. He's a great defender. His two-hander is solid. We know that. The forehand can be explosive. I still think at times it just looks a little bit clunky, if I'm being honest, and doesn't look quite fluid. The serve is there's definitely things to be gained, I think, on serve, but when he hits his spots, it can be effective. He's got really good hands, great drop shot, good lobs. So let's see. I mean, he's got all the tools to succeed and be in the top five. We've seen he's been in the top four at times during his career. He's still so young at 21 years of age. There is no reason why he should not have a resurgence in 2025, in my eyes, as long as his mentality is in the right place. At number six, I've gone for an interesting choice. I've gone for Taylor Fritz, and I'll tell you why. This was a really good year for Taylor. I'm not sure, I could be wrong, that he can replicate the same thing. Making the final of the US Open and making the final of the ATP finals is not an easy feat, especially for someone like him. Um, because and when I say someone like him, I mean someone that hasn't won a slam, right? We're not talking about, Medvedev's won a slam, and you were saying he's not had a great season, but he still made a final of a slam. So there's a few things I think to talk about um, with Fritz. And actually, sorry, before I talk about Fritz as well, for Rune, what's interesting, by the way, win percentage. If we look between 2022 and 2024, his win percentage has actually increased. It's gone from 63% to 66% to 67%. So that's not too bad given what's happened, right? In his coaching career, in his career for coaches, even, and also for the injuries that he's had at times. But yeah, anyway, sorry, enough about that. Let's talk about Taylor. So Taylor's had a really good year, right? I mean, it's been a career best season. The win percentage also does highlight that 70% for the year, really, really impressive. 69% last year, which is super solid as well. And also 69% in 2022. So the last 3 years have been very, very solid. And of course, 2022 is when he had that breakthrough one in Indian Wells. And that really was a big year for him because in 2021, he was only at 61%. So it was a big jump of 8%. And he hasn't really looked back since. He just continually has played some really consistent, high quality tennis. This year as well, some titles, of course, to speak of. Eastbourne beat Max Purcell, Delray Beach beat Tommy Paul, lost Munich to Struff, lost the US Open, of course, to Sinner, and lost the tour finals to Sinner as well. Look, I mean, similar to Demoner when I talked about him earlier, I do think he is really squeezing. If he was a sponge, that sponge is getting squeezed excruciatingly. Every bit of every drop of fluid is like his potential, and he is getting the most out of it. Honestly, he's squeezing it so that there's nothing left, and you can only respect that, honestly. But there's always going to be big gaps, I think, and this is the issue in just ability wise between himself and an Alcaraz or a Sinner. And that's not just coming down to ball striking ability, because I think his ball striking ability is very good, but also when it comes to movement and to, I don't know what the best word is for it, but it's almost the X factor. And with Sinner and Alcaraz, they have that ability to create something from nothing. Taylor isn't like that. These players are different. They are built differently, I think it's fair to say. Alcaraz can come up with a bit of magic, and so can Fritz, but it's different. The caliber, the the level that they're able to tap into is just different. And we saw that at the ATP finals. Sinner, right, for example, in the round robin, and both times he beat Fritz 6-4, 6-4, but let's talk about round robin. Fritz was playing out of his skin in both matches. Sinner at 5-4 in the round robin in both sets, took it up a notch, went through the gears, and broke him in both sets at 5-4 and took the set 6-4. Barely anything in those sets, just that one game in each set. And it just shows that Fritz is up there. He is hanging with the big boys, but can he do the same? I'm not so sure. Like, he beat Zverev 4 times at the back end of this year. Zverev's surely going to turn that around at some point, and they will play each other again. And I hope they do at the Australian Open, because Zverev in the head-to-head was the one with a dominant head-to-head. He was dominating it before this year. Fritz has come out and said, "Well, you know what? You're not that good. Not compared to me at the moment, anyway. I'm playing some great tennis. I can beat you." And Zverev's been very frustrated by that, of course. He lost him at the US Open, lost to him at Wimbledon, lost him in the ATP finals, lost him in the Laver Cup. So, I mean, it, it, he's missed some big opportunities as well, right? Because of Fritz. And that will hurt, I'm sure. So I've gone for Fritz at 6, just because I do think there will be a slight dip. Because really, the only way that he can get any better for 2025 is if he makes consistent semis and finals throughout the year, at the slams, that is. Wins a few Masters 1000 titles, maybe instead, or if he were to win a slam. Could he win a couple of Masters 1000 titles? I reckon he could win one. Could he win a slam next year? In my opinion, no. That's just my opinion. Number 5, I've gone for the same person, number 5, Daniel Medvedev. And the reason why is because I don't see him getting substantially better. I'm hoping that he won't get substantially worse. Now, of course, we've heard a lot about the balls, and he doesn't like the tennis balls, and he doesn't like the conditions, and they're not suited to him, and he feels like he's unable to really tap into his best qualities, and that is shot tolerance and being the player to outlast the opponent. But because of the conditions, players are able to stick with him, with his movement, and also with the way that he plays, and he's feeling like he is being, I guess, handicapped in these conditions. There's also the added element that people are figuring out that they can come to the net and serve volley a lot effectively against him. And also, I think he hasn't really had maybe that intimidating factor this year anyway, where he seemed like, where he used to seem like he was just a wall, and the ball would just keep on coming back, keep on coming back, keep on coming back. And that could be to do with the conditions. I think part of it is just to do with the fact that he's also frustrated in himself this year. And in terms of win percentage for the year, he's actually dipped quite substantially this year. So he was at his highest in 2021 at 76%, when, of course, he won the US Open as well. 71% in 2022, so a dip there of 5%. Then went up by 1% to 72% in 2023, and then 64% in 2024. So, that's a pretty big dip of 8% this year. I think it's fair to say. Titles, none this year. Of course, hasn't won a title since Rome last year. I think that's been the biggest issue as well. That's really playing on his mind, because he was a serial title winner throughout his career. He has been. And to then, win in Rome last year and not win a title for a year and a half and lose 5 finals in a row: US Open 2023, Beijing 2023, Vienna 2023, Australian Open 2024, and Indian Wells 2024. And by the way, the last 4 finals, 3 of them were to Sinner, 1 to Alcaraz, and the US Open was to Djokovic. He's getting frustrated because he cannot seem to get past these guys. And I think that is definitely playing on his mind. I spoke to him in the press conferences at Wimbledon. He was my favorite player to talk to, if I'm being honest. He's very frank. He's very realistic. He's one of the smartest players on tour. And I think the problem is that I think he is, I don't think he's accepting it too much, but I think it's dawned on him, and it's probably an uncomfortable realization that these guys, in terms of talent-wise, are a level above. And he's unsure about how he can counteract that. How can he close the gap? And he's trying different things. He's playing ultra aggressive. He's coming to the net. He's He's doing all these different things that he would never normally do against other players, but it's just not working. So, what does he do? It'll be interesting to see how he uses his off season, and also how does he look going into the Australian Open, where he has historically had really good results, just hasn't managed to win a title there, but has made finals there. So he'll be hoping that he can win a final there at some point in his career, or maybe he'll be like Andy Murray and not be able to. But we'll see. Um, Fingers crossed he finds some of his best form going into 2025, because it'll be interesting to see if he's able to start problem solving against an Alcaraz or a Sinner. I mean, he obviously beat Sinner at Wimbledon in the quarterfinals, but lost to Alcaraz in the semis. Alcaraz was ill. Sorry, Sinner was ill. He, 1 in 5. If Sinner wasn't ill, would he win? I'm not so sure, but a win is still a win. At number 4, we have Alexander Zverev. Now, I know he was at number 2 this year, and we're going to have a very interesting video, by the way, come out about him in the off season, about whether he will win a Grand Slam or not in his career, that is. Look, I mean, he's played a lot of tournaments this year. I think he'll play a lot of tournaments next year too. But I don't know what it is. I just have a feeling. Actually, I might have changed my mind. I don't normally do this. I'm not going to put Zverev at 4. I'm just thinking about the amount of tournaments that are going to be played, and that obviously has a big bearing on rankings. It's not to do with the best players necessarily in the world. It's to do with the players that are have played the most consistent throughout the year and have won the most matches throughout the year, of course, in the big tournaments, etc. I'm going to put Djokovic at number 4. And I'll tell you what, I was going to put him at 3, but I'm going to put him at 4. And the reason why is he is going to have a limited schedule. We saw it this year. It's already happening. He missed the ATP finals. He, missed Paris as well. The Masters, Paris Masters and ATP finals, he's had phenomenal results throughout his career. Didn't play them. He may not even play any of the warm-up tournaments for Australia, or maybe he'll only play one. He'll play Australia. He'll just pick and choose what he wants to play. He's coming towards the back end of his career. I do think he'll be higher than 7, like he was last year. He's got Andy Murray in his corner. What an exciting partnerships that's going to be. Let's see how that pans out. But for me, I'm super excited to see his 2024. A lot of people think it might be his last. I'm not so sure. I think a lot of it's going to come down to, can he compete with the big boys at the slams? Can he win a slam? Now, he wasn't too far off last year or this year. He won the Olympic gold. That's what he wanted to do. That's it. Now, this season is going to be full steam ahead for the slams. Let's see what he can do. Win percentage has dipped quite dramatically this year to 76%. It was 89% last year, phenomenal. 86% in 2022, 89% in 2021. I mean, what do you want to say apart from phenomenal? I mean, if you look down the years, 2015, 93%. Wowzers. Anyway, it's just phenomenal. In terms of recent titles, Shanghai, he made the final there, of course, and didn't manage to beat Sinner, lost in straight sets. Paris Olympics, though, that was a big one, of course, beat Alcaraz into tiebreakers. And then Wimbledon lost to Alcaraz in the final there. So, look, I mean, he has just been a phenomenal player for so many years. He's going to pick and choose. I actually wouldn't be surprised if he's even low in the rankings, but my thinking is that he's going to win a couple of major tournaments, and that's why he'll be at number 4. I think he'll win some tournaments. I think this year he was obviously plagued by the knee injury as well. I'm hoping that he'll be fully fit. He looks like he's almost there. Hopefully he's had a good off-season. I think it's good that he's had the break, really, with no Paris, no ATP finals. He should be fresh going into 2025. Let's see what havoc he can cause. So then at number 3, I've gone for Zverev. And the reason why is because, he was number 3 the majority of this year until right at the end. Alcaraz maybe didn't have a great end. He didn't have a great end to the season. And, I think Alcaraz is going to figure out how to stay more consistent, at least throughout the year. He's obviously had some big dips, etc. So for Zverev, it's been a pretty good season. Of course, won the Paris Masters and also, you know, made the ATP, sorry, also made the final of Roland Garros where he lost to Carlos Alcaraz after being 2-1 up, which, let's be honest, was not the best result for him, given that he, of course, quote unquote, choked against Dominic Thiem after being 2-love up in the US Open final in 2020. But what's been a real positive for him is the fact that his win percentage has increased from 60% last year to 70% this year. And that is trending in the right direction after, of course, the horrific injury in 2022 when he hurt his ankle. 2023 was a year where he was just trying to find his form again. And this year he has found it. So impressive stuff from him in terms of titles. Paris Masters is the biggest one. Rome, he won as well in May. United Cup, won that, beating her catch. I'm not sure really that counts, to be honest. But Roland Garros and Hamburg, he lost to Carlos Alcaraz and Fils, respectively. But yeah, I'm going to go for him at number 3. Will he win a slam this year or going into 2025? He could. We'll see. Number 2. Now, this is a difficult one. I'll tell you why. We could actually have Sinner at 3 or even 4. And I'll explain that in a second. But I'm going to go with the assumption. I'm going to go with an assumption. I'm going for Alcaraz at 2 and Sinner at 1. Now, this is with the assumption that Sinner is not going to be banned, which, by the way, he could be, because, of course, he did test positive for a banned substance this year in Indian Wells. He was then cleared by the ITIA and for any wrongdoing and hasn't served a ban. WADA have appealed it, and it looks like he could potentially serve a ban in 2025. The question is going to be how long. If it's only going to be a month or 2 and he could potentially choose when, then it probably won't be too problematic. He can probably do it at a convenient time. If it's going to be longer than a month or 2 months, it's going to be problematic for his ranking anyway, because, yeah, he's going to be in trouble. So I do think if he does get banned, Alcaraz, Zverev, maybe even Djokovic, maybe even Medvedev, he could be down at 5-6, if not even lower. But I mean, it's been a phenomenal year for him. We can talk about Sinner first because we're talking about him now. I mean, what an incredible season, a breakthrough season. After winning no slams, of course, this year, won the Australian Open, then won the US Open, won Davis Cup, won the ATP Finals. A win percentage of 91% is absolutely phenomenal. And actually, that is if I was looking at Novak Djokovic's seasons, and the only season that he's got a higher win percentage than Sinner this year was in 2015 at 93%. He was at 91.1%, I think, for 2011, which is, in a lot of people's eyes, actually the best level of tennis by any tennis player. There are quite a few people that think that in history. So, look, I mean, obviously he was playing in a different era with Nadal and Djokovic and Nadal and Federer in their peak. So, have to take it with a pinch of salt. But I mean, it's still a phenomenal year, of course, right? For Sinner. 81 matches played as well. In terms of titles won, I mean, it's been a prolific year. He won the Australian Open, won Rotterdam, won Miami, won Halle, won Cincinnati, won the US Open. He lost Beijing in the final to Alcaraz, but then he won Shanghai, beating Djokovic, and then won the ATP Tour final. So just a pretty good year for him. But no, look, I mean, a phenomenal year, in all honesty. And yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say. He's been an absolute machine. He's been an absolute machine. Honestly. So we'll see how he gets on in 2025. But if he doesn't get banned, he's going to be there or thereabouts again. There's just no doubting that, because people are struggling, especially on hardcourt. It was one of the best hardcourt seasons of all time. And the majority of the tour is on hard court. What's going to be interesting is to see whether he's able to figure out on grass and clay. In terms of, when I say figure it out, I mean win a slam on clay or grass. That's going to be the real big thing for me, because if he wins at Roland Garros or Wimbledon, that's when it then becomes very interesting, because Alcaraz is going to be thinking, oh, hello, okay, so you're not just good on hard court, you're not just, he's good on all sorts of surfaces, but you're not just phenomenal on hard court, you're also phenomenal on clay and grass. I'm now in trouble. And, he obviously beat Sinner in 5 sets at Roland Garros. Is very close. He lost Sinner to Medvedev in 5 sets in the quarterfinals. So he's not far off. So these guys are going to have to bat him off with a baseball bat, it seems, potentially. And I'm sure Alcaraz will have something to say about that. But I put him at 2 just because he doesn't seem to be as consistent as Sinner, at least throughout the whole year anyway. He won 2 slams himself. A very good year for him still. But a bit of a dip in win percentage, which is interesting. Went from 78% from last year to 75% this year. So a bit of a dip, and that's because of some of the abnormal results outside of the slams. And one thing that I have to say, and it happened to him in 2023 when he lost to Djokovic in Cincinnati, and it was a really tough match, really tough. He lost in 3 sets. He was crying after. It took him up until Indian Wells of this year to really find his form again. He didn't start off the year very well. Ended last year not particularly well either, and it took him time to find his groove again. Then he lost the Olympics to Djokovic this year, 2 tiebreakers, super close, great high quality match. He said it didn't affect him after. My opinion is it definitely did. Didn't play well at the US Open, lost to Van der Zandschulp very early during the tournament. Didn't play particularly well at the ATP finals, and didn't make his way out of the group. And here we are, right? Didn't play particularly well at the Davis Cup, even though he won his singles. Look, I mean, I think he needs some time to process that Olympic final loss, and it seems like a long time ago. But look, I mean, I still think he's young. He's only 21, and it takes him some time, and that's how I see it. So for me, I think Alcaraz will still win slams this year coming. He just needs to find that ability, and it might just come with maturity, to get over those losses quicker and play a more consistent level throughout. Because what I see is that Alcaraz's ceiling, in my opinion, is higher than Sinner's, but his base is lower than Sinner's. Sinner is consistently, and Alcaraz has said this, like an 8 or 9 out. Well, he said 9 or 10, but let's say 8 or 9, in my opinion, out of 10 in almost every match. Alcaraz can go from between a 6 to a 10, I'd say, every match, if not even a 5 to a 10 sometimes. He can be in that range. So he needs to find the right balance, right? And the way Sinner plays, it's easier to be more consistent, in fairness. Alcaraz has got a more varied game, but he'll figure it out. I think he'll figure it out. So I've gone for Alcaraz at number 2. And just because I think he'll win slams, I think he'll win some Masters 1000 titles, but I don't think he'll be quite as consistent as Sinner. But I'd bump up by 1 spot for Alcaraz. And in terms of wins, won Beijing, lost to Paris in the final, won Wimbledon, won Roland Garros, won Indian Wells, and that's a pretty damn good year, in fairness to him. In terms of just outside, there's loads of people to talk about. I'm not going to talk about everyone, because I think we could be here all day, in honesty. But honorable mentions, of course, go to Casper Ruud, who was in the top 10 this year. I do find it hard. Like, he had a good end to the year, but is he going to be able to carry it through? And I don't know what it is. I just don't know if I see enough from him. Other guys are coming through. Surely Aruna, Tsitsipas, Draper, those guys are going to push on. But they've got more weapons. It's not even just about weapons. I just feel like they've got a bigger ceiling. It's just whether they can really capitalize. Dimitrov had a really good year, but I think he'll be just outside this year coming. Same for Dimona as well. Shelton, he's going to be there or thereabouts. He's getting closer to the top 10. Tommy Paul is just outside this year. Had catch as well. He only had a pretty bad season due to injury, in fairness to him. And then I've gone for a bit of a wild card in Mpeshi Pericard. I thought he was really, really good this year. Obviously, breakthrough at Wimbledon. Interviewed him a few times as well at Wimbledon. Check out the interviews on the tennis interviews playlist. By the way, all of these players we've interviewed at Wimbledon, so go and check out the tennis interviews playlist if you want to hear us interview them. I mean, why not? They're short as well. Berrettini had a resurgence at the end of this year, which is great to see, including the Davis Cup, of course, and playing some really good tennis. Question is going to be, can he play a high enough level consistently throughout the year to start really pushing on beyond the rankings? We'll see, and making another run again into the top 10. And then one player that I'm very high on is Arthur Fils. I think he's going to be very close to the top 10. I wouldn't be surprised if he even makes it into the top 10. Super talented Frenchman. He just seems to be such a well-rounded player. And I would be surprised if he's not just outside, if not inside the top 10 as of the end of 2025, as long as obviously he doesn't get injured. But look, I mean, you might look at Ruud and Dimitrov and say, and Dimona, and be like, they were in the top 10 this year for Zan, but I'm just thinking they might be just outside. I mean, Ruud was outside the top 10 for the majority of this year. So I think he got a bit fortunate with Djokovic not playing a lot of tournaments and a few others, etc. And maybe things just fell his way a little bit. Just saying. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've been tuning in throughout this whole video, we really appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button. Do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on podcast platform. Appreciate each and every one of you. Speak soon, and we'll see you on the next video.